The rain had stopped only minutes ago, but the world still looked gray, cold, and unforgiving. The streets of Seattle glistened with puddles that reflected the dull light of the cloudy morning. Inside a small corner grocery store, a young woman stood by the checkout counter, holding her little boy close to her chest. Her hands trembled, not from the chill outside, but from something deeper: fear, exhaustion, and the shame of what she was about to do. "I'm sorry. I just don't have enough," she whispered to the cashier, her voice cracking as she counted the few wrinkled bills in her hand. The boy, maybe 5 or 6, clung to her, his big brown eyes fixed on the loaf of bread and a small pack of milk sitting on the counter. The cashier looked uncomfortable, glancing toward the line forming behind her. Then, without warning, the boy spoke softly, his words barely a breath. "Mommy, I'm hungry. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and the power of one good heart to change someone's world, please don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe to this channel. Your one click helps us spread hope where it's needed most." Her name was Lena Carter, and 3 years ago, her life had been completely different. She used to work as a dental assistant, married to a man she once believed would protect her from the world. But after he lost his job, things started to crumble. The arguments turned to shouting, and the shouting to silence. Then one night, he simply left. No note, no money, just a broken promise and a child who would soon start asking questions she didn't have answers for. Lena tried to survive. She took on cleaning jobs, babysitting, anything that could put food on the table. But as the months passed, the bills piled up faster than she could pay them. Rent was overdue, her car broke down, and her savings vanished one desperate grocery trip at a time. She had learned to go without, but how could she tell her son Eli that some nights there just wasn't enough? Today was one of those days. She had exactly $9 left, and that wasn't even enough to cover bread, milk, and a small jar of peanut butter, the essentials she needed to get Eli through the weekend. She had been standing at the counter for nearly a minute now, frozen, her heart pounding as if every eye in the store could see the truth. She was failing. The cashier sighed quietly. "Ma'am, if you can't pay, I'll have to put it back." Lena's lips quivered. "Please, my son just wants to eat." Her voice broke, and she quickly turned her head to hide the tears forming in her eyes. That was when she felt it, a gentle hand on her shoulder. She turned around and saw a man standing behind her. He looked to be in his early 40s, neatly dressed in a white shirt, his expression calm but kind. He didn't say anything at first. He just looked at her, then at the small boy in her arms, and finally at the groceries on the counter. Then he reached into his wallet, pulled out his credit card, and handed it to the cashier. "Please, add a few more things for them. Maybe some fruit and cereal too." Lena stared at him, speechless. "No, I can't accept," but he just smiled softly and shook his head. "You're not accepting anything, I'm just passing it forward." For a long moment, she couldn't move. It wasn't just the act of kindness, it was how simple and sincere it was. No judgment, no pity, no questions, just help freely given. The cashier began scanning more items, and Eli's face lit up as he watched a few apples and a small box of cereal slide across the counter. Lena's hands trembled as she tried to thank the stranger, but the words caught in her throat. The man simply nodded, took the receipt, and handed the bag to her. "Take care of your boy. The world's a little less harsh when people look out for each other." As she left the store, the cold wind brushed against her cheeks, but this time it didn't feel unbearable. She felt warmth, a small spark of it, deep in her chest. She turned back once to see the man watching her go, and he gave her a nod that said everything words could not. That night, Lena heated up soup for Eli in the tiny kitchenette of their rented room. The light flickered weakly above them, but she didn't care. Her son was smiling, spooning mouthfuls of soup and humming to himself. She hadn't heard him hum in weeks. When Eli finished eating, he looked up and said something that nearly broke her heart. "Mommy, the nice man helped us because you're good." He knew it. She hugged him tightly, hiding her tears in his hair. "No, sweetheart, he helped us because he's good, And maybe one day, we'll get to help someone too. For the next few days, Lena couldn't stop thinking about that moment in the store. The stranger's face stayed with her, not because he looked familiar, but because his act of compassion had touched something she thought she'd lost, faith in people. Still, reality didn't magically fix itself. She was late on rent again, and her landlord had given her a final notice. She couldn't afford to lose the room, it was all they had. So, the next morning, she bundled Eli up and took a long walk to the city center, looking for work. She checked every cafe, every store window with a help wanted sign, but the answer was always the same: sorry, we're not hiring right now. By noon, her feet ached, and Eli was getting restless. They sat on a bench near a small bakery, the smell of fresh bread filling the air. That's when she heard a familiar voice. "Didn't expect to see you here." She looked up, and there he was, the same man from the grocery store. He smiled when he saw Eli nibbling on a cracker. "You two okay?" Lena nodded quickly, embarrassed. "We're managing. Thank you again. For that day, I didn't even get your name." "Daniel," he said simply, "and don't mention it." They talked for a while. She learned that he owned a small family restaurant a few blocks away. He mentioned how his wife had passed away 2 years ago, and how he'd been raising his teenage daughter alone. "Life throws punches," he said, "but it also sends people who remind you to stand up again." When she mentioned that she was looking for work, Daniel hesitated for a moment, then said, "We could use an extra pair of hands at the restaurant. It's not much, but it's honest work." Her eyes widened. "You're serious? Come by tomorrow morning," he said. "We'll figure it out." The next morning, Lena showed up early, Eli clutching her hand as they walked into Daniel's restaurant. The smell of coffee and fresh bread filled the air. It wasn't fancy, but it was warm, clean, and full of laughter. Daniel introduced her to the small team, gave her an apron, and said with a grin, "Just don't burn the toast, and we'll be fine." Days turned into weeks. Lena worked hard, clearing tables, taking orders, learning the rhythm of the place. She found herself smiling again, sometimes even laughing. Daniel noticed how gentle she was with customers, how Eli would sit quietly in the corner coloring while she worked. Every evening, Daniel would make sure they ate before heading home. "Can't have my best helper going hungry," he'd say with a wink. But what touched her most wasn't just his kindness, it was how he treated her like an equal, not as someone to pity, but as someone rebuilding her strength. Slowly, she began to feel like herself again. Months passed, the restaurant thrived, and Lena became part of its heartbeat. Daniel's daughter, Sophie, adored Eli and often helped him with his homework after school. The little boy, once shy and withdrawn, began to laugh again, his eyes bright with the innocence of a child who finally felt safe. Then one quiet evening, after the dinner rush, Daniel found Lena cleaning up near the counter. He handed her a small envelope, her first bonus. "You've earned it," he said softly. She looked inside and saw more money than she'd ever held in months. "Daniel, I can't." "You can," he interrupted gently. "And you should. You've worked hard for this. You and Eli deserve it." For a long moment, neither spoke. There was only the sound of the rain outside and the low hum of the refrigerator. Then Lena whispered, "I don't know how to thank you." "You already did," Daniel said with a smile. "You showed up. That's enough." A year later, the restaurant had a new sign out front, Eli's Corner Cafe. It wasn't just a business anymore. It was a story of second chances. Daniel and Lena had decided to run it together. Partners, friends, and perhaps something deeper that words didn't need to define. Eli loved telling customers how the cafe was named after me, and every time he said it, Lena would smile with quiet pride. She often thought back to that day in the grocery store, the day a stranger's hand on her shoulder changed everything. It had started with hunger, with a desperate mother and a child who just wanted to eat, but it had ended with hope, with kindness that rippled outward like sunlight breaking through gray clouds. And maybe that's what life was all about. Not the moments of despair, but the moments when someone chooses to care. If this story touched your heart, please like, share, comment, and subscribe. Every act of engagement helps us keep spreading stories of hope, humanity, and faith in goodness. Before you go, tell us in the comments below Would you be the stranger who helps, or the one who walks away? Moral: sometimes the smallest act of kindness can rewrite someone's entire story. What you give freely today might be the miracle someone's been praying for all along.